Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Gatekeepers. I am Bishop-elect Vanessa M. Brown. I'm happy to be your moderator and host for tonight. Today is World AIDS Day everywhere. Every city, every country, people have been having different events for it all day and even now into the evening time. And so tonight we're not any different. And so again, we're ending the HIV epidemic, equitable access, and everyone's voice. Before I bring on our guests, I want to thank Facebook Live audience and Twitter and YouTube and Instagram and everywhere, and YouTube and Instagram, everywhere on social media where we can be found for Beyond the Gatekeepers. Thank you for joining us again this week. We're going to ask that you share this Facebook Live. Is going to be a great conversation. Share and shout us out. Tell us where you're from. Everybody, let us know where you're watching. I see you, the first person, Pastor Anthony W. Sullivan, hailing from Chicago. Thank you so much for joining us. I see you, Dr. Tony McNeil. Thank you for being here with us tonight. I see you, Robert Johnson. Thank you for being here. I see you, Apollo. Thank you for being here. So many people are coming in. Tell us where you're from so that we can know. In the meantime, I'm going to bring in our guests. I have known most of them for a while now, and they are what I consider to be experts on HIV and AIDS. And I'm so happy that they said yes to this conversation. The first person is Torrian L. Baskerville. He's the manager and prevention person at NASTAD. He's going to tell me what those acronyms stand for. Torrian, will you unmute yourself and greet the people and tell them what you are doing with your new company you're working for.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Bishop-elect Vanessa. So my name is Torrian Baskerville. I am the manager of prevention at NASDAQ, which stands for the National Alliance for State and Territorial AIDS Directors. It is a national organization. And essentially what I do is I'm a technical assistance and capacity builder that works with CBOs or community-based organizations and health departments throughout the South, really working with them around things such as cultural competency and or cultural humility, right? Talking about HIV stigma, talking about social determinants of health, and all things that is gay, that is centered around gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men.
Excellent, Torrian. Thank you so much. Our next guest is coming to us by way of Texas in the person of Jeffrey Campbell. I call him Great Pastor Jeffrey Campbell. He's the Chief Program Officer for AIDS Foundation in Houston. Jeffrey, will you come and greet the people and tell them what you do and what you're working on now?
Sure. Good. Look, first of all, good evening, Bishop-elect Vanessa. It is so good to see you and be in this space on this evening. I am a follower of Beyond the Gatekeepers, so it just brings me great joy to have this opportunity on this World AIDS Day to share in the conversation. As you said, I'm Jeffrey Campbell. I am currently the Chief Program Officer at AIDS Foundation Houston. AFH, as I will probably say most of this evening, is an almost 40 years old nonprofit HIV prevention organization in Houston, Texas. We are the oldest HIV nonprofit in the state of Texas. And about 2 years ago, I joined the team after working about 4 years with the City of Houston's Health Department, and as a Chief Program Officer. And in that role, I oversee, or what I call have under my tree, all of our human services programs. So that's our housing, supportive services for both individuals living with HIV as well as individuals who are vulnerable for the acquisition of HIV. But also our prevention department, which includes our testing for HIV and STIs, as well as our Wall Talk program, which is an almost 25-year-old program that we have with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and also our PrEP clinic that also now includes, is no longer just a PrEP clinic. It is called clinical services because we do PrEP for individuals who are not living with HIV. And we also do what's called a program called Start Now, rapid start antiretroviral treatment for individuals who are either newly diagnosed with HIV or persons who have been previously diagnosed and either never been in care or have been in care but have not had recent care in the last 12 months. So that's a big chunk of what I do right now at AFH in Houston. And I'm glad to be here.
That's a lot. That's a lot. But we appreciate you, Jeffrey, and know that it is good work happening down in Texas. Our next visitor, our next guest, and they've been with us before, is Deneen Robinson. She's a motivational speaker, health educator. Deneen, please come and greet the audience. Let them know what you're doing and what you're doing. You're muted, beloved.
Greetings, everyone. It is super exciting for me to be here on this particular night. As someone who has lived with HIV for 30 years now, it's like the divine walking. And so I am truly honored to be here. I am currently serving as a consultant for the National Birth Equity Collaborative, which is an organization that does all things maternal health, looking at infant mortality, maternal mortality, as well as abortion and other maternal health needs. My focus is Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, bringing my skills in terms of policy and education and community building to help those communities create policy that serves the needs of the Black women in those states.
Thank you, Deneen. Thank you, Torrian. Thank you, Jeffrey, so very much. And of course, certainly last but not least, and she is the person that will help move this conversation along, and the person of Bishop Yvette A. Flunder. She's the presiding prelate of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries and the senior pastor of City of Refuge United Church of Christ in Oakland, California, celebrating 30 years of pastoral ministry in that great city. Bishop Flunder, will you come and greet the people for us? And you can lay a foundation for the conversation as well.
Well, I'm in good company. I am thrilled to be able to speak about something that has been so near and dear to our hearts, and in many ways, a very real and cogent reminder for how the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries and City of Refuge came into existence. After 30 years plus in the fight to end HIV and AIDS, I know epidemics and pandemics are not racist or homophobic. Epidemics and pandemics are not religious or anti-religious. Epidemics and pandemics are the realities of sickness and disease that attacks and seeks to destroy our immune systems and our ability to thrive and live. Epidemics and pandemics are not assigned to those who are marginalized by ethnicity or sexual orientation or beliefs or economic strata. Yet our current atmosphere is prioritizing COVID, while HIV is not yet over. It is still a pandemic. And this attitude of disproportionate attention to the pandemic du jour, as I call it, hinders our response, yet again, to ending HIV. And remember, in its genesis, it was ascribed to a certain group of people with the hope of another group of people that it would, in fact, wipe a certain group of people out. Here we are again with one of the greatest deterrents to hearing what we need to hear in the present pandemic. One of the greatest deterrents is yet again bad religion. HIV is not over. It could have been, though. Funding is not being directed to HIV like it should be in this moment, in the proportion needed to really bring an end to HIV. Some of it is being redirected. And underfunded health workers and programs, not just in the United States, but everywhere around the globe, are feeling that. Can you imagine epidemics competing with epidemics? So today we are, and we remember today, this is World AIDS Day, and the television is consumed by Omicron. This is World AIDS Day. Today is World AIDS Day. So today, while we are talking today, we will remember the survivors. We will remember those who served, who are on this panel tonight, who served in the belly of the beast. I know the belly of the beast. HIV during the early years. We will remember those who died, their significant others, their families and communities. We will remember the survivors because we have survivors on this panel. We will remember the struggles. We will remember the pain. We will remember the victories. We will remember how we carried on until we got the money we needed to do what we needed to do. We will not let those years disappear, because those years, Bishop-elect Vanessa, are the years that need to teach these years. They need to talk to the people who have come through to this point in an epidemic, even while funds are waning. And so the current epidemic and pandemic response should not be an either or, but a both and. Someone should be learning from what these geniuses and these survivors have to share tonight. We are at it yet again, creating a pandemic by failing to respond on time because of justice issues that are met with judgment. Bad religion, racism, politics, And now on World AIDS Day, not enough has been said about this virus. It is overshadowed by this particular virus is overshadowed by its younger sibling right now while we're talking. We'll take a moment, I pray tonight, to speak the names, a few of those that we have lost and those we have served. And I hope that we'll also in the chat speak the names of those that we have lost and those that we have served and those who have survived.
We can do it right now, Bishop. That's how I wanted to start. So yes.
Speak the names and speak what you feel is needed to continue the fight against AIDS. I have a dream, Bishop-elect Vanessa, because I believe that embodied in us is a comprehensive model for a better way to deal with an epidemic. In fact, for a better way to deal with the world. God bless you all. It is so good to see you. You are the soldiers. You know I know you. So I know that you are the soldiers. Let's share with one another tonight. Thank you so very much for being here.
Yes, please show the names on the screens as people start speaking the names of those that they want to remember. I can say already, Oliver Martin, and we all know Oliver. Remember Oliver. Chuck, Christy Cassidy, Nan Kinney, Anthony Hollins, Archine Turner. I love this. This is good. Yes, Oliver Martin. We won't forget you. Anthony Hollins, again, I called. Any more names that you all want to call, feel free to open your mics and call those names. Terry Felton. Yeah, we remember. So important that we remember those who have gone on. And to that end, Bishop gave us a great foundation to have this conversation. Daniel Williams, we speak your name. Joel Driscoll, we speak your name. We got people here from DC and from Ohio. This is so good. My good friend, Jeffrey Bullock from DC. Yes, sir. Chicago is here. California is here. Texas is here. New York City is here. Charles Fry, we see your name. Yes, we speak your name tonight. And so I want to get down to some of the questions that I have. Dwight Sheely, I see you, Bishop Flunder. Yes, and those of you that want to put stuff down in our private chat, you can do that. And I'll call those names as we go on in this discussion because they're here with us as we are talking today. And so my first question to the panel is, Jonathan Williams, we speak your name. What does equity mean, and how does it or the lack of it show up in the fight to end the HIV epidemic? Let me say that again. What does equity mean, and how does it or the lack of it show up in the fight to end the HIV epidemic? Miss Nettie, Miss Joyce, we speak your name. And so, not in any particular order, whoever wants to go, Torrian, Jeffrey, Deneen.
So I'll be happy to go first, and I know my partners in crime tonight will follow up. But for me, as we talk about equity as it relates to the HIV epidemic, I will just give you an example. There's a 6-foot fence, and there are 3 people that are standing on one side of that fence, and they cannot see what's on the other side of that fence. There's a man who is 5'9" tall. There is a teenager who is 5'6" tall. And then there's a little girl who's 4'11" tall. If we give each one of those individuals a box to stand on, and that box only lifts each of them up 4 inches, then the man who is 5'9" tall will be the only one who can see over the fence and see what's on the other side. The young teenager nor the little girl will be able to see. They have the same box. The box is the same height, but the box that is the same height does not enable every one of them to see what's on the other side. That's equality. You got the same box. That's the same height. Equity is when each box is specifically fitted so that it helps each of those people to see over the fence, to see what's on the other side. So when we talk about equity as it relates to HIV and on this World AIDS Day, equity, equitable access to healthcare, equitable access to education, equitable access to food, good food, healthy food. We're talking about not giving every community, every neighborhood, every zip code the same box, because that won't do it. We have to give each community and each individual and each family the box that they need that helps them to see on the other side and to get the services that they need.
Excellent. Torrian, Deneen, do you all have anything to add? Bishop Flunder?
I think for me, I just want to say it a different way, right? That equity really is about dealing with the person that is in front of you or the community that's in front of you, right? There's not a one size fits all when we're talking about equity, right? And the thing about equality for me is that I will never be equal, right, to anyone else. I am my own individual. I come with my own nuances. I come with my own individuality, and therefore you can't handle me in the same way you will handle Jeffrey, right? Or the way you will handle Deneen, right? And so it's going to be imperative that when we talk about equity, we talk about dealing with Torrian with all of his nuance and all of the things that he comes with, right? And dealing with Jeffrey in the way that all the things that comes with who he is individually, right? And so I think that is the thing. And to Jeffrey's description and to his example, I think a part of the conversation around HIV and specifically in the epidemic is really centered around equality, right? And that has always been the case. And we need to begin to shift to equity. And I dare say, but I think that this is going to be a long reach, but I think we can get there, is really talking about justice, right? How do we remove the fence to begin with, right? The fence of the isms, right? How do we move those out of the way so that everybody has access to everything and not one more than the other or one less than the other? And so I think that that's a part of the conversation when we're talking about ending the epidemic.
So the word that comes to mind for me is reproductive justice on the road to creating reproductive freedom. Reproductive justice centers the individual, and it centers the individual with the understanding that you're going to engage that person to find out what they need. And then from that point to collectively, you will work towards whatever is going to be necessary for them to have the justices, the freedom that they need ultimately to create the life that they want to live.
And Bishop-elect, can I add this point?
Please.
To answer the second question, right? The part about how does equity play in or not play, either playing in or not playing into how we end the epidemic currently. I think in theory, right, there is this idea of equity, right? Which is why sometimes the funding, not sometimes, but the funding is distributed to specific communities that have a higher prevalence, right, within that community, right? And so the thinking is, okay, if I put more money into this community that has higher incidences of HIV within that community, then somehow that should fix the problem, right? And so in one theoretical way, that is equity, right? However, in practice, what we know is that it's not equitable because there are restrictions to which you can use the funding, right? And so again, we talk about, currently I live in DC, but the struggles of DC is different than the struggles of Texas where Jeffrey is. So yeah, you may give me a different pot of money, but then you say, well, you all are funded to do the exact same thing or to do the same services, but you can only do it a certain specific way, right? Well, what happens if the way that I do it in my community means I have to do it a little non-traditional, right? It means that I may have to go and sit outside the sex party, right? And then engage those when they come out of the sex party to have a real conversation with them, right? Or that may mean I may need to do an event that is very non-traditional that may push the envelope, right? Whereas if Jeffrey could go to the same money and give the same services and could do it within the restraints or the constraints of what that funding looks like, right? And so I think while in theory, the funding is distributed in an equitable way, the way in which it is practiced or the way in which it is rolled out, it is not equitable, which is why we continue to see the things that we're seeing as the numbers are continuing to stay the same. There is some movement dropping in certain communities. However, there is still this disproportionate effect in certain specific communities.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Torrian. Jeffrey, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I did, because I wanted to speak to what Torrian was saying about the funding. And you're absolutely right, Torrian. A lot of times, certainly when we're getting federal funding, or if we're getting state funding that is funneled down from the federal government in some way, we're told how to spend it. Even if we write these fabulous work plans, the scopes of work, it still comes back, but you got to do it like this. And the reality is that really probably none of us, regardless of where we are, if we're in San Francisco, if we're Houston, Dallas, DC, Chicago, Philadelphia, Baltimore, we're all going to have to tweak that prescriptive, that recipe in order to reach our communities. And how do we know that? We know that because we're in the community. So I always find it challenging that someone in Atlanta at CDC writes the prescription for how we're going to attack the issue of HIV in Houston. I struggle with that. We know we need the money and we do what we can with it. Because I think, and I hope we'll get to this on later in the conversation, is because it's not always about testing. It's not about how many condoms you put in the street. It ain't even about if you go into the sex party and hand out lube and condoms. That's not it. It is so much more. It is the social determinants of health. It is mental health. It is education and uptake of PrEP. It is making sure that people can eat. It is making sure that young people who have been displaced from their homes, or they've come out of the foster care system because they've aged out and they don't really have anywhere to go. So they have to do some things in order to have a roof over their head. It's all of those things. And if I can make more money doing what I do, doing it raw, then if it's $25 versus $50, I'm gonna go with $50 and take my chances. So that's, just kind of my stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking, as you both were talking, that at the end of the day, part of how we got here is we do this thing with funding where we put the money where we see the most harm from the disease, and then we leave out the folk who have been successful at getting their numbers down, but they still need the help too. And, I always think historically, funding was bottom up. When we became somewhat successful at managing HIV with meds, funding became top down because everything needed to be tied somehow to whether it was going to impact disease burden. And unfortunately, folk were not able to talk about how mental health and other social determinants impacted disease burden. So those things went away and it became more quote unquote evidence-based and on how people were told that they needed to do their work with the funding that was being provided. Unfortunately, because of how our system works, we have to figure out how to not just know what people need, but to be able to tie it to outcomes. And you can't always do that.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. Bishop-elect, may I do this just a minute? Because both Torrian and Deneen said some things, and I'm not sure who's in our audience. And I don't want us to do HIV 101, but I do want them to understand what we're saying.
Sure.
You said prevalence, Torrian. What does that mean? And then Deneen, you said numbers. You just threw out the numbers when they get their numbers down. What does that mean for for those of us who don't do this work every day?
So your disease burden is determined by two numbers, your CD4 count and your viral load. Your CD4 count being above 400 suggests that your immune system is healthy in some way. That's for women. For men, it's above 700. Viral load is, it needs to be undetectable by the test that your clinic, hospital, physician's office is using. It's important that folk understand that you need to know what the limitations are of that test to determine if, in fact, you actually are undetectable.
And I just want to throw a shameless plug out there. Undetectability means untransmittable, right? So if you're undetectable, that means your likelihood of transmitting the virus is 0. Not somehow, not possible, potential. It's no, you cannot transmit it to anyone.
Depending on your success at being on treatment, being consistent
Absolutely.
with your doctor's appointments, and the test that your provider's using.
Absolutely. And again, what we're talking about, right, is nuance within all of
Yes.
it, right? What that means specifically. But yeah, so prevalence really is talking about the commonness within the community of the virus, right? So if a community has a high, if it's common, if more communities are living with HIV within that community, then that would be the prevalence, a higher prevalence of HIV within that community, which means, yes, community viral load, right? Just means that there are more people living with HIV within that specific community.
Just so you know, people are very happy that you all are breaking it down. They said they need all the information that they can get. And so I want to shout out, thank you, Anthony Sullivan. We all know Anthony, Pastor Anthony is in there. He's breaking it down for the people, talking about federal funding is either mandatory or discretionary. He's breaking that down. The federal HIV budget is organized into 5 broad categories: care and treatment, cash and housing assistance, prevention, research, and global and international. So we appreciate that. Let's make sure that more people are involved online in this conversation. Share with your friends and family. Bishop Flunder, did you have something to add to that?
Well, just a couple of things. This is wonderful. It's almost like preaching fodder, with all sorts of examples and this is the way it has to be done in our community. And thank you. But I thought about a couple of things. So, it's like a race that everybody is asked to run, and somebody says, on your mark, get set, go. And somebody has a race car and somebody else has a wagon. And though somebody said go, what it is that we are transporting ourselves in, or what it is that we have as what we need in our communities at the go mark is very different in other communities. That is the point that I am making. What exists for us to work with is not a level playing field. So a lot has to be done as it relates to infrastructure. There are a lot of our folks that have received grants and thought that they had money. And the truth of the matter is, grants are not money. It costs money to run grants. You have to have more money than the grant in order to service the grant, because there are things that the grant will require that the grant doesn't pay for. That happens over and over and over again. And folks thought they were going to be able to get an airplane. And I told them, I said, that's not the way that it's going to go like that. Doesn't make any difference how much money you got. It doesn't make any difference. And the more money you get when you get through doing your hiring, when you get through doing your fundraising events, when you get through paying for your audits and all of the things that you have to do, you find that you have to raise money to have money. It costs money to have money. So there are communities that have those infrastructures. They already have money. And already, to all of the examples that have been lifted up, they are higher up the fence because they have more to stand on, Jeffrey. They have more to stand on when they begin. That's what we want to say to our folks. We have to say that back to the institutions. so that people begin to understand we're not beginning from the same places. So just a thought I wanted to add.
That was excellent. Excellent. And the chat is getting more robust on Facebook. So this is good. A gentleman, Judah Project, he said, we experienced this recently with federal funding and we're not funded. And Judah Project, tell me where city you're in, because we are not doing the work. We're not funded, not because we are not doing the work of successful at being impacted. The reviewer of the grant application plays a major role in our experience that many times are not in our community, nor do they understand what it takes to also provide educational support services to youth ages 14 to 24, living DL lives and also experience HIV, and look to CBOs to provide services. But how can we when the funding is also sometimes selective? Wow.
I'm going to say one more thing.
Is the Judah Project. The people are going off, okay?
I want to say one more thing. Somebody told me once before when I had my baby, and she was, my baby's strong-willed. You all know she's strong-willed now, and they said, do something with that child. You need to do something with her. That's what one of my friends told me. Do something. Don't let her act like that. Do something. Beat her. That's what my friends said. You need to beat her because, she was strong-willed and opinionated like mama was, Beat her. And I said, listen, you don't have pig nor puppy. Come back and talk to me when you have a child. A little further down the line, they had a child. And was just, and the child was very self-willed.
Different story.
You understand me, don't you? And I said, so how are you beating the child is what I'm trying to find out. And to what degree are you beating it because it's your child now? And so it is. We have as African Americans and people who are informed in early life by religion and faith. Many of the people we serve have those same realities. Mm-hmm. And there's a language, not just a culture. There's a language, there's a way, there's a service delivery. And I don't care whether it's in the club or it's at the back home musical after the convocation. It doesn't matter. The point is that we have a language, a place and a way that we speak. Mm-hmm. We need to be able to give some teaching to the people who fund us about what our needs are. And the people who say that they're going to help us, it's not a one-way stream. It's not just a stream of being told by the folks who enable us to do the work, but we need to educate them about the work we do. We can only do that if we cohesively come together and say, now listen, there's some things we need, just like we did in theological education. We changed the institutions of theological education in this country when we went to school. We went to school to learn. We didn't know we were going to school to teach, but we went to school to teach. And it reframed the entire program in many of the institutions that we have been to. The same needs to be true about how we do this work. That is the work I see you all doing. That is the work that is necessary so that the funding will meet the needs of the communities who are most disadvantaged proportionately by HIV and AIDS.
I love this. That was just the first question, just so y'all know. That was just the first question. Okay. Let me move to the next. How do we address the issue of stigma in our communities? Not just the people who do this work, but in our communities. Whoever's the first.
So I'll take this one first. We have to address not just external stigma, but internal stigma. We have our own, pardon me, Bishop, but we have our own shit that we have to deal with. Those of us who are living with HIV, that we think about ourselves and our disease and our issues and our fears and all of that stuff. And we put that on folk. And then if you add your sexuality on top of that, your religious ideals on top of that, our stigma is often informed by our historical narrative. HIV just it enhances that. So we have to go back and unlearn who we say we are, and then engage in a stigma conversation with the folk externally. But it requires some internal work first. And the external stigma is at every intersection of our lives. Because coming out about your sexuality, about HIV, is not a one and done. It's for some of us, it can be every day. And a bunch of moments in the day, depending on how your day is structured. Whether you're saying the words or not, something about all the isms that are you impact how you show up at each moment. And so we have to get okay with us as Black folk who are gay, as Black folk who are living with HIV, as Black folk who are gay, living with HIV and clergy, as Black folk who are gay, living with HIV and in this work. We have to get okay with us. That's the first stigma that we have to work through, evolve through. And then we will have the tools, I believe, to deal with the stigma that is coming at us. Because most often, once you get okay with you, stigma ain't your thing.
I'd like to add, Bishop-elect. So earlier this year, actually on January the 6th, and we know that's a notable day in our nation's history, I was doing an event such as this with one of the alumni chapters of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated here in the Houston area. And then earlier in the month of November, I did another similar event with the Greater Pearland, which is a Houston suburb, chapter of the Links Incorporated. And, Black women of means, I'm sure that most in the audience were insured. And so the conversation that I motivated them to have and the challenge that I made to them, and get it, I'm a Black man, cisgender Black man, but I'm saying this to my sisters, my mothers, my grandmothers, my nieces, my, whoever, however they show up in my world. When you have your annual exam, your well woman's exam, tell your doctor you want an HIV test and you want to be tested for all the STIs. And when your doctor says, and many of them will, oh, no, you don't need that. You say, no, I do. And you make them, and if they don't, you need a new doctor before 2021 is over. Because that's a stigma, and saying that in that space opened up stories of Black female panel members who talked about experiences they had had with their medical providers that stigmatized them, that made them feel like they had done something bad because of who they were and because of what they asked for. So I think that's another important conversation about stigma and how it shows up in the medical field, and how sometimes many medical practitioners are not equipped to have that conversation about a woman or a man's or a trans person's sexual health. That's a stigmatizing event that can happen in that space that can often make someone not want to come back, or certainly not want to ask for the services they need. So I always like to talk about stigma from that perspective, in that medical environment where we are supposed to be in the trusted hands of a trained physician or nurse practitioner clinician. So I wanted to add that to the table.
And let me say this. So I think, I am a huge proponent about language, right? We cannot have a conversation about stigma without having a conversation about language, right? And so what I've learned in this work is, for me, I highly dislike when we say HIV positive, we need to shift that language, because when we say HIV positive, what we're saying is that the person is their status, right? And we disregard the humanity of the person, right? And so I say, let's talk about, people living with HIV, because we are prioritizing the humanity of the person who we're talking to or talking about, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is, and I don't want to, this is not to pick on anyone, right? But we're talking about stigma, right? I am challenged with this idea of down low or DL men. I am challenged with that because just because you don't know that this individual is having sex with whomever they're having sex with does not mean that they are on the DL. That doesn't mean that nobody knows, right? What that means is they have the permission to dictate who they give the information to. Right now, I know this may get me in trouble. The same way people living with HIV have permission to dictate who knows their status and who does not know their status. Right. And so we cannot have this conversation about stigma without first talking about language. We as a community need to begin to look at our language and how we are using it, because sometimes when we even in unintentional ways, we are harming people with our language. Right. We just had recently, a couple months ago, had a whole situation with Dave Chappelle. Right. And the whole conversation was centered around what? His language and how he weaponized his language, right? And so we need, as a community, not people within this work, we need to have real, and that's simple, right? That is a very simple thing, in a simple way that we as a community can address HIV stigma. But for me, and this is where where Deneen and I may differ, in that I believe that there's
That's okay.
Yeah, it absolutely is, right? It is completely okay, right? That I believe that this is an and in both. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. So while we are dealing with the individual level, which I think is very important, right? And the internalized stigma is very important to deal with, we also need to talk about ways that society and institutionally we do this, right? And we stigmatize people, right? So when you're talking about, you're having laws on the books talking about, trying to dictate what bathroom people use, right? When we're talking about criminalizing people living with HIV who make the decision not to tell or disclose their status for one reason or another, then we're talking about stigma. Right? All of those things prevent people from getting tested, from seeking treatment, from adhering to treatment, right? Those are all things that we need to talk about. And I believe that this is all things that we can talk about and focus, right? And focus on together. And so, stigma is one of the very passionate things of mine. I believe like we need to really deal with stigma. HIV does not kill people. Stigma kills people. I cannot tell you how many people I know who are educated people who are living with HIV and make a conscious decision not to get into treatment because they are afraid of what that looks like and what may come with that. And so we really need to deal with that. And that's not just an individual thing, because even if I internalize stigma, that is coming from some place. That came from I didn't make that up. Right? I didn't wake up one day and just said, I want to be stigmatized on this morning. That's not how it happened, right? There were external factors that dictated or that influenced how I feel about myself. And so while I need to do that work on one end, I also need to make sure that the community and the institutions support that change that I am making personally. And so there's an and in both, right? I don't think one is greater than the other one.
And Torrian, I want to add, as we talk about stigma, and Deneen talked about internal stigma and in regards to the person, and I want to talk about internal stigma in regards to our community, and I want to speak specifically to our Black gay male community. So I'm all over social media, and I'm in a lot of groups, particularly on Facebook, and so I don't know if it was because today was World AIDS Day that this question was posted in this group this morning, but the question was, if someone that you're considering being intimate with you discloses that they are a person living with HIV, and they didn't say living with HIV, they said has HIV, what are you going to do? What conversation are you going to have? And of course, because I've been in the group long enough to know that that was the same question that was asked about 12 months ago, I was like, okay, we got to do education again, because the same person asked the question. I keep up with my groups that well. So so a Black gay man who is a man of a certain age asked this question to a group of other Black gay men, and I was looking at their responses. And some of them teetered on the edge of maybe that might be okay, but most of it was stigmatizing language that would stigmatize a person living with HIV, that makes it such a challenge for people who are living with HIV to discuss their HIV status with sex partners. We'll just start right there, because you don't have to disclose that at grandma's house over Thanksgiving dinner. But if it's so, the struggle is what we think in our mind, and we have not yet unlocked or unlatched ourselves from HIV of 1981. We've not unlatched ourselves as a community of Black folks, of Black gay folks. We've not unlocked ourselves from that. And so we still see the person living with HIV as a person who is demonic, as a person who is a viper in the community that is out to destroy the community. And we can't let that go. And so what I say in those instances, as I said it this morning in that group, as I said 12 months ago, let's shift the narrative. Let's shift the question. It really isn't about that person. It's about you. It's about, what are you going to do before you even get to that man? Before you even get to him clothed or unclothed, what are you going to do for you? If you are presumed to be HIV negative, are you going to consider PrEP? Are you going to consider condoms? Are you going to consider condoms and PrEP? Are you going to educate yourself about what Torrian said earlier? You equals you. Undetectable equals untransmittable. Are you going to educate yourself about that, so that when you encounter someone who may say, and look, as Black gay men, trust. At this point in the game, if we're in the dating pool, if we're in the sex pool, we're going to encounter someone who's HIV positive or who is living with HIV, whether they tell us or not. That is the reality. So we have to have better, safer, non-stigmatizing conversations, and not use Miss Facebook as your space and place to demonize people. So we have to do that, or we're going to continue to kill ourselves. And I'll say this, and I say this all the time, until we end the epidemic in the Black community, and more specific in the Black gay male community, we're going to always have an HIV epidemic. And stigma is what is killing us. So
just a little caveat.
Go ahead.
The Black gay male church community, because those are the deepest closets that we have.
Yes.
Now, we have closets everywhere. I won't suggest that we don't. We have professional closets, we have education closets, but the closets, the reason I suggest what I suggest about the Black gay male closets in church is because the presence of Black gay men in church is in so many ways the heart of it is the beauty, it is the music, it is the panache, it's the dressing the first lady, it's all of the things that give color in so many ways, and effervescence, both to the pulpit and the pews, in many ways comes from
the
men.
Tangible and intangible.
You see what I mean? And the other thing that I have learned, that I'm sure that you all know, is that closets are not problematic in the ways that people think of them outside of the church. There are people that are completely and fully titillated by the concept of closets. They like the idea of I know and you know but nobody else knows what we're doing. There's something about that is titillating. The secret itself, the clandestine encounters.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, well, I wish that everyone would just tell the truth. They don't want to. And
it's the last hurrah, last horizon.
And that's what makes it juicy.
Yes.
And so when you really don't want to, you just don't want to. And some of them will avoid the club because of its openness. There are some people who are much more comfortable with the secrets. And so I speak that by saying we have to be mindful that that is also a real part of our community. And I say that as a person involved and engaged in gospel music. I don't have to say much more. I think I can say that as a person involved and engaged in preaching, teaching preachers, ordaining preachers, and preaching with preachers and teachers. There's a lot I can say about what I know, just like we're talking about what we know. It is much more. Oh, all right, I'm going to say it, Deneen. Here it comes. It is much more common for me to have open conversations, for us to have open conversations in and around faith with women who are HIV positive than it is to have open conversations sometimes with the brothers. I know them because they are sons and brothers to me, if you understand. But in many cases, it is a part of the pageantry. Hallelujah. There it is, right there. The pageantry of the Black church to live on the edge like that. That's a part of what it is. I want to put that out there and take the demonization away from it. That's my intention. Not because I'm trying to reveal something that I think is problematic. It's a style. I'm a gospel music artist. You cannot make me unlearn what I have learned. It is a style and a way to be. The question is, do we have a theology and an understanding that will embrace this reality? And it is much more than it's okay to be gay. It is much more. It means to be able to define and celebrate. Hallelujah. Glory to God. I had a moment. Define and celebrate the contribution and the existence of these realities among us. And I could care less what Chappelle thinks about it. You know, he got a little circle. When I'm talking about raps all around the globe, that's another day and a different conversation. God bless you is my prayer. I'm going to mute myself.
Amen.
Can I add this one thing that's centered around stigma that I just want to add to the conversation? And that is we need to shift when it comes to HIV and ending the epidemic. We also need to shift the conversation from sexual behavior, right? Because that in and of itself is stigmatizing, right? This idea of hypersexualization specifically of Black gay men and queer men and same gender loving men, you know, that adds to that stigma. And so we need to shift the conversation from sexual behavior, because what we also know is there is not one group of people who is more sexual than another one, right? Or does more risky, and I dislike that term, right? Risky sex. There is no evidence to back that up, right? And so therefore we need to have a real conversation around removing the sexual behavior centralization of HIV and really center what we talked about earlier, these social determinants of health, right? These isms that prevent people and or that put people at risk for HIV.
Just please give me kiss. I'm so sorry because I'm back again. And let me tell you why I'm back again. I'm back again because one of the real concerns that I have is we don't celebrate sexuality. That concerns me. We have a theological burden to find ways to stop demonizing human sexuality. That is the bane of faith. I'm just going to put it out there. That is why that so many of my colleagues say, such as in the the stronger Pentecostal movements, the ones that are sending you to hell in a handbasket, are often the most active, right? Why the cloisters? Oh, come on. Stop looking at me like I don't know what I'm talking about. Like the cloisters of the Catholic closets. On the one hand, you know, you can't take communion if you're Joe Biden. On the other hand, they have scads of legal situations that they're going through because of these young men and young women too over the years. Why am I saying that? Part of our freedom around HIV and the stigma that Torrian's talking about is to free ourselves from the stigma associated with human sexuality. And the greatest stigma associated with that is bad religion. I know we need another time to talk about that, but we have talked about it on Gatekeepers many times and said that the biggest problem, the biggest theological problem is the fact that we have even our understanding of Jesus does not understand Jesus as a full man. We say very God and very human, but we cannot imagine in our minds that he could ever have been intimate. There's no one who wrote anything about that. There's something about it that is necessary, but not something that should be celebrated. That was the way we were taught. You're going to have to do it. So just, you know, do it and get done with it and move on to something else. It was never something to say, this is a glorious gift from God, a blessing in my life. And the consequence of that is the stigmatization that follows us all the way. And you're right, Torrian. It's not unique to any race of people or any sexual orientation. It's a part of the package. And it's the package that God made. And there should be concerns about how we handle the package. But simultaneously, why can't we rejoice in it? How come we can't just clap our hands and thank the Lord? This is thank the Lord. Don't you thank the Lord for it? I thank the Lord for it. Listen, I hope that some of our folks are listening, that you thank the Lord. And if you don't thank the Lord, you need to find somebody to help you thank the Lord. Okay. And if you can't find nobody, thank the Lord by yourself. But thank the Lord. I think it's important to thank the Lord.
In all things. In all things.
And you know, yes, we have to, yes. Come on. We have to get okay with pleasure.
Yes.
In all its forms.
You're right, Deneen.
Always says we have to have three kinds of conversations, particularly when we talk to people of faith, churches, synagogues, mosques, wherever we go. We have to have theological conversations. We have to have sex conversations, sex and sexuality conversations, and we have to have justice conversations. All of that has to be encompassed in one. It's going to take a lot of work, but in order for us to really get through, that's what we're going to have to do, right? Yeah. So we got 30 years on the books right now, but we're going to have to go further.
Yeah. And do no harm. Am I right, Bishop?
Yes.
It's Prince duty of everyone who loves the divine and is loved by the divine. Do no harm to yourself. Do no harm to others. And if you really grasp that, then you won't do things that are inappropriate to yourself, and you won't have inappropriate things that you do to others. You're so right. That is it. Those three things. That's what we need to talk about. That's a whole conference, Bishop-elect Vanessa.
Yes, it is. Now,
Vanessa, can I just say this? So yes, please. I love when Bishop talks about the church and the flowery pageantry and all of those things that make us happy, that excite us, and do no harm. I know, Bishop, you preached about that in some space or place I was in with you. And Torrian, thank you for bringing up this piece about how Black folks and Black gay folks are not having any more ridiculous sex than any other race or ethnicity. And what I typed in there, because you said, you know, that we know that. We may know that on this panel, but we as a community don't know that. And that's the path that we've been following, is that we are these sexual beasts both men and women, and we talk about the black penis and how big and how long and how thick and how satisfying it is. All of that, and that ain't true. But you know why we hang on to that? I think we like that story. We like that story. We like being able to say or believe or just think that we are conquering somebody sexually, because somewhere else our power has been stripped of us.
Come on here.
Our right to vote, our right to go to a school that has books that really teach us what we need to know, our right to health care. We started this out talking about equity. So our right, we've had those rights stripped from us.
Our
So
humanity.
let me hang on to this. Let me hang on to this story, because this story is the story that everybody believes. And everybody puts me, and they've been putting us in front of people since slavery. They have been standing us up butt naked in front of people saying, how much will you pay for this one, this man, this woman, this buck, this wench? And so still in 2021, we don't know that we are accepting that language of buck and wench in 2021, but we really are. But if we could just break from that and enjoy sex for what it is, and understand that there's fluidity in sexuality, and what you may do and like one day, you may not want to do that the next. It doesn't make you not like it anymore. That's just who you are. So, like I said, it's a whole bunch of conversations in here about sex, sexuality, enjoying it.
This is a part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5. This is a series, okay? For real.
Yeah. And yes. And I think also we have to understand that as people who engage, not only do we not have to stop embodying it, but we have to stop perpetuating it too. Look at my person. They are blah, 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 whatever that thing is you think about them. How about that's a good human? And just leave it at that.
That's good. That's good. Listen, y'all, that's only the second question. That's why I said this is a part 2 and a part 3 and a part 4, for real. Now, I think we answered this to some degree, but I still want to ask, what is the meaning of ending the epidemic? What is the meaning of ending the epidemic? Sorry.
Now, it depends on who you ask. And that's just a very fair answer to that question. It really depends on who you ask, because some people say, it's getting to zero, right? And zero new infections, right? Okay, great. So what about the people living with HIV? What then happens with those group of people, right? With that, like, so there really is, and there has to be, what I consider to be this idea that we will not end the epidemic unless we are dealing with holistically how people are living life, period. Right. And that means dealing with, and we talked about it earlier, social determinants of health, right? Dealing with housing crisis, dealing with food insecurities, dealing with healthcare, dealing with all of the things that make a person be able to have equitable, right, and sustained and adequate living and healthcare overall, right, and just who they are. And so for me, when I think about ending the epidemic, for me, what it looks like is dealing with the things, the isms prior to that put someone at risk for HIV.
Thank you. I had to chuckle because, y'all are saying things in the chat, which is true. Does anybody else have anything to add? And like Bishop Flunder said, no epidemic has ended. Okay.
So I think I personally find this fascinating because we don't have a cure for any virus. I'm just going to start right there. It is an organism who that is designed to live. Some of them take longer to kill than others, but we don't have cures. Even polio, and whooping cough, where we have got them under control, they are not cured because they are back. A virus is a living organism that can live in the body for a period of time that does not survive. HIV as a virus does not survive in the presence of light, heat, or air. So its success is on staying inside long enough to be passed from one human to another human. And because of all the things that we've been talking about, we would have to essentially lock everybody in a cage for maybe 6 months to a year, while scientists took blood and got every single mutation picture of the virus, put it all together with the original A and the B and a free virus that hasn't been exposed to any human, and it stay together as a compound and work in order for us to get to a place where we have a cure to put us on the journey to ending this epidemic. Having been a part of cure research, it can happen. I believe that. However, it takes our part, our active participation. And our participation comes when we make agreements to do no harm and take care of ourselves and commit to engaging with others in ways that are not harmful. That's how we end the epidemic.
So I have a little bit of a different perspective, probably maybe because I've worked in public health, but also because the organization I work for now, we retooled our mission statement this year to simply say that our mission is to end the epidemic in the greater Houston area. That's tied into CDC's, the Center for Disease Control, ending the HIV epidemic, a plan for America. So when I look at it, I guess from a scientific side, and I'm not a scientist, I look at it as when we are reducing the number of new transmissions within any given place, let's just say the city of Houston, to a manageable number. And I don't even know if we know what that number is. But I do know that San Francisco and New York have declared at some point that they ended the epidemic. Now, be clear, that doesn't mean that, well, based on my understanding, doesn't mean that there are no more HIV transmissions. It does not mean that people living with HIV suddenly go somewhere else. It simply means that the number of new transmissions is being reduced to such a rate. It's almost like undetectable equals untransmittable in my limited understanding. So that, you know, that's just my piece when we start talking about ending the epidemic. And you all are right. I can't remember who brought it up first. What happens with people who are living with HIV who
Torrian.
when we end the epidemic? What does that look like? It looks like they still live. There are still people living with HIV. And hopefully the goal, I think, with that is that most of our folks who are living with HIV are treatment adherent. And since they're treatment adherent, they will be virally suppressed, or U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable. And I think that's important because when I look at numbers in Houston, our viral suppression rate is not that good. And when we look at the viral suppression numbers and we see the number of people that we are able to have that information, it's Black people that are not virally suppressed. It's Black men who are not virally suppressed. It's Black youth and young adults who are not virally suppressed. It's Black gay and bisexual men who are not virally suppressed. It still comes back to us. And it's still, I think, is rooted in stigma, the church, religion, whatever you want to call it. Because, you know, I hear things come out of people's mouth that haven't been to church in 40 years. And it is so churchified when it comes to demonizing other folks and saying what's wrong and what's right. That is harming, that's killing people. And so I sat a spell today out on the patio of our deli at work after I responded to that stigmatizing question that was asked in that group of Black gay men. And I felt the weight of World AIDS Day. I felt the weight of particularly every Black gay man, bisexual man, closeted man that has died from this virus because they could not live a healthy life either before the HIV transmission or during. I felt that weight. And so it's that weight that really helps me to hang on to what is it going to look like when we do get to ending the epidemic. Not new transmissions, but ending it, getting the numbers down in such a way that we're able to say, in some sense, we've got to control. And it becomes uncommon, like it's uncommon in certain ways for us to hear about polio or whooping cough. You know, it makes the news. So we want HIV to be an uncommon new diagnosis in our nation. That's my hope and my prayer.
I think you made a very good point, Jeffrey, from the very beginning on in terms of funding and how things are done. We know that, you know, the CDC is in Atlanta and those that are participating in those things are from that particular area. But I think it would make more sense for each state to be able to say what they need, right? And so that people can get the services that they need. I wanted to bring that up because someone else said something about it in the chat. Before I move to the next question, this is going to be my last question. Then I'm going to give you each an opportunity to make final statements since we're at 9:20. The last question is what, and this is, you know, I'm not going to say just Deneen can answer it. Maybe you all can answer it. What are some of the unique ways that women living with HIV manage their disease, families, and disclosure? And part B of that is, has there been any change in the numbers relative to Black women as it relates to HIV?
So I can start. There are a number of things that have been successful and problematic for me when it comes to looking at women in HIV, Black women particularly. Fortunately, there has been a downward trend in terms of new infections. However, it has not been consistent. It is still significantly high in the South. Texas, Houston and Dallas go back and forth between who has the highest 1 month to the next, 1 year to the next. And so we're not doing a good job at that. Unfortunately, women, particularly Black women, have not consistently been able to maintain an undetectable viral load. We don't know if that's because of meds, if it's because of lifestyle, if it's a combination, but there has not been consistent maintenance of an undetectable viral load among Black women in this nation. There are a few of us where that has been our reality, but that is not common. It's not common at all, unfortunately. And we do know, based on some research, that we prioritize our children, we prioritize our families. We are not only taking care of our children, those of us who are aging with HIV are also taking care of elder parents. And so we are scrunched in the middle of having to take care of our own children and now having to take care of our parents and trying to manage our own life and living with HIV. As we age, menopause impacts our bodies, our immune system. U equals U has been an interesting positive and negative. Positively, women are having more sex unprotected, which means that they're getting pregnant, which means that they're having abortions because they weren't prepared for pregnancy. And so
Deneen, what is viral load before you keep going? Somebody wants to know.
So your viral load is the amount of virus that you have in your body per cubic milliliter of blood, which is the size of a teaspoon. They test it, and ideally you want your viral load to be undetectable. You want the test to show that you have no virus in your body on that particular day based on the test that they used. And so, though that issue, while some of the changes are bringing freedom, they are also bringing more complications. And also, as treatment has become simpler in lots of ways, not just one pill a day, but treatments that have less side effects, they are more sophisticated, require more education in order for people to be successful. And so balancing all of that is also impacting how women are doing with treatment. And the last thing I would say is women are not as engaged in movement building, in understanding this disease, or being active in their communities. And so they're being told what to do, being given information versus them leading work. There's only one robust organization that offers, that is led by women for women. And they are representing all women, but they don't necessarily speak for all women. And so we have to do a better job as Black folk in making sure that we are getting those stories, getting them engaged in this work, getting them speaking up for themselves.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I was going to ask another question, but we're going to hold off probably for the part 2 and the part 3 of it. But I want to get final statements from each of you if I can. And so I'll start with Jeffrey Campbell.
Thank you, Bishop-elect Vanessa. Thank you, Bishop Flunder. It has been good to sit at this table this evening, this virtual table, with all of you, Torrian and Deneen, to have this very necessary conversation. When I closed out a similar event that I did last night with the Links, we did a backstage debrief. And I asked them, from the first show, what were some of the comments that they got? And they were, all positive comments. But what they said they got was so many people had never heard of PrEP, had never heard terms of treatment as prevention, undetectable equals untransmittable. They had never heard the language. And so it just reminded me, and it took me back to the space that because we do this work every day, sometimes we get lulled in the false sense of security that everybody knows at least a little something about HIV and PrEP and NPEP, but that's not true. And so I hope this conversation ignites for us in our audience tonight a desire and to learn more, a desire to talk more in your communities, in your churches, in your schools, in your families, at Christmas dinner. You don't even have to start the conversation about HIV. Start the conversation about sex and sexuality, and a sex affirming environment. Start the conversation there so that we can get comfortable having these conversations and create safe spaces around us and within us so that we can grow and overcome the stigmas that are attached to the negative conversations that we've been having for generations. So it's my pleasure to be here. AIDS Foundation Houston, I think we're doing some great work. I'm excited about the work that we're doing, and I'm looking forward to 2022 and coming back, doing some more work with everybody that's at this table this night and so many more. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jeffrey. Now, I wasn't going to ask the question, but I think the way that it's phrased now is probably something that might be appropriate for us to try to tackle. So not everyone will achieve consistently maintain viral suppression. That is often weaponized and unintentionally creates a hierarchy among persons living with HIV. So the question is, how do we encourage viral suppressions and refrain from vilifying folks and in HIV? I think that's a better way to put it. And Torrian, go at it.
Yeah, so I think what it is not encouraging viral suppression, but encouraging and centering adherence to treatment, right? Because when we centralize what we know, right, what science says is that when a person is in treatment and adheres to treatment, they have better health outcomes, right? And so what needs to be centered is adherence to treatment. Don't worry about viral suppression, because viral suppression, again, may not be achieved by everyone. And also to Deneen's point, with Black women, it is inconsistently attained, right, and maintained. And so, again, when you center healthiness, right, centering someone taking care of themselves and maintaining healthiness, whatever that looks like for them and in their lives, I think is the way we need to go and move away from really centralizing viral suppression.
Yeah, I agree with that. I did a talk with a group of women last week, and one of the things that I said with them is that it is the nuances of treatment that help us be successful. For example, when you take your morning meds, don't drink a cup of coffee, then take it, because you're going to end up in the bathroom, which causes malabsorption. So you took it, but you're not going to get the full benefit of it, because coffee and your meds is going to make you have to go to the bathroom before you can get it in your system. Taking your meds with cola. You don't ever take medicines with brown liquids, because you can't hold it in your body. You're going to end up in the bathroom. So it's things like that. When it says take your medicine with food, ask the follow-up question, how many calories? Because it's not just a piece of toast. And you got to have fat in your diet, right? If it says no food, how long do you have to wait after you take it before you eat? It is those kind of nuances that help us be successful, that help us actually maintain viral suppression for the long haul. And walking, come on, people. Lifting some cans of peas. It is literally the nuances that we often do not get in a doctor's office that help us maintain viral suppression. And that's when I teach it that way, so that people understand that we're focusing on you being the best person that you can be for you, and engaging as if you are so important that you want to do everything possible to live your best life, whether you have $1 million or no dollars. It don't matter. Because all these things that I suggested you can do, and they will help you maintain care. You don't feel you don't feel vilified. You just feel like you are just taking care of yourself in the best way you can. And I remember this woman, she said, okay, So if I can do this, I said, do it for 30 days and see what your labs say. And then do it for 30 more. So it's those kinds of things that make the difference and will get us to ending HIV, because people are centering themselves and the people that they love.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. Anybody else have something to add to that question?
I just need to say this. What you just heard from my sister, that is why I have loved working with her for almost 20 years now, is because of the way she has this conversation, the work that she has done to understand this virus for herself, and then able to take it and break it off and help other people to understand it. That's why I love you, Deneen Robinson, because of what you do for the people. And lift your hands and tell God glory for that.
Glory for that. Hallelujah.
I'm honored, y'all, because Bishop can tell you this. I'll share this story. I had a period of being nauseous for 7 days straight. And I don't know if Bishop remembers this, but I had decided that I was going to, this is what I said. I said, fuck treatment. I'm not doing it no more. I can't be nauseous. I cannot live my life swimming, standing up straight. I couldn't do it. Only comfort I got was laying on my sofa still like a statue. And my partner at the time called her, and because she could not come up with any way to make me take my meds. And she called Bishop, and Bishop said, honey, I understand that you've decided that I said, yes, ma'am, I'm not doing it. I can't do it. I can't do it. And so she came up with all these wonderful, she said, it's about the quality of your life and not the quantity of years you live. I said, that's true, but I'm not taking it. But what happened after that conversation was, and I wasn't on pills, I was doing liquid. What I did is step back and walk myself through what I had done so that I could figure out the nuances of what was actually causing my nausea. And each time I tried something different. And I found out that if I took that medicine with peanut butter, I would not get nauseous. Or a Slim Fast, I would not get nauseous. And wash the tool that they gave me, because it came with a little tool that you could take it with every day so you could get the amount of it correct. Well, not washing that every day caused the alcohol in the medicine to build up. That's when I started really paying attention. It is the nuances that you do not get in the doctor's office that make the difference. Now, I wasn't drunk. I was sick. It made me nauseous. So, we have to, before we quit, we have to look again. That's it.
That's good.
It's so good.
Isn't it good?
That's good.
It's very good. Torrian, you have a final statement, and Deneen, and then Bishop Flunder, you can close us.
Yeah, I will echo Jeffrey's comments and just saying thank you, Bishop-elect. Thank you, Bishop, and thank you Beyond the Gatekeepers for the invitation. This has been a treat for me, to have these. I love having these kind of conversations where you can have civil discord, right? And still be on one accord in the message and in the outcome, right? Because we may get to the destination through different avenues, but the point is that we get to the same destination. And so I appreciate these kind of conversations. And, you know, it's always great to share space with my good brother, Jeffrey. You know, I work with him many times and often. And so it's great to work with him, and also now sharing this stage with my new friend, Deneen Robinson. It was great to have this space with you. And so I would just leave the people, I've said enough. And so I would just leave the people with this. And that is, you know, when asked, you know, what is the greatest commandments, right? Love God with all thy heart. And then the second is the same. It's similar, right? Love thyself, love thy neighbor as you love thyself. And I think that it's important that when we talk about this conversation, that we center loving ourselves and loving our neighbors, because when we do that, none of the other stuff matters, right? The isms go out the window. All of the other barriers will go out the window when we learn to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, which means first we have to love ourselves.
Excellent. Thank you. Deneen, Bishop?
I just want to say that this has been amazing. This has been an amazing way for me to end World AIDS Day, to reinvigorate me in this particular part of my life work. My goal is to be a privileged gardener, which is to plant seeds as I move through life. And I want to thank you all for the opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Bishop Flunder?
This was outstanding and authentic. I think that's the part that is so beautiful. You know, we are several different beautiful creations created by God, designed, as my sister Danny Bella talked about it a lot. She said, she wrote a song that says, "You're a designer's original, you're one of a kind, created by a master with one purpose in mind, to be a showcase of God's glory for the whole world to see, and an example of God's beauty as God shines through you and me. And with my whole heart, I have seen an example of God's beauty." And there was so much that was said, and so many different ways that people present. So everything that we have said was what was an answer to someone. Everyone doesn't need the same answer. There is no pat answer. We have enough diversity just on this panel. Imagine the diversity that we have for our community in total, and the ways in which we can help strengthen one another. I'm not called to everyone. Neither is any of the rest of us. But we are called to those that we are called to, with a word of hope from our experience. This was absolutely beautiful. Everything is it. And I tell you, the honest to goodness truth, I said, I wrote a note to myself. I said, we just want to live. But not just live. We want to have a quality of life. We want to do that individually, and then we want to sow that seed among all of those that we come in contact with. To live as Christ. And that in so many ways, no matter what our faith paths may be, to live is to entertain the presence of the divine on a personal and a communal level. And so I would love for us to close with a word of prayer, if we can, on World AIDS Day. In the midst of this epidemic and pandemic that still exists, that is still ravaging the continent of Africa, and there is still a diminished amount of support in that area, and it still is a part of our communities and still often divides us. But we are beginning in this moment to visualize our future. What is coming will be better than what has been. So we thank you, gracious God, by all of your many names and all of your beautiful and magnificent manifestations. We are so grateful for these who have been called, by the circumstances of life, born into life for a moment just like this. And I pray that each one of them may continue to know and to expand and to, in so many ways, share the gift that you are in them and in us. Go before us now. Open doors, make ways, give us the words, give us the supply that we need, give us the courage, give us the fortitude, give us the connections, give us the goodwill, give us the political connections, whatever it is that we need to help ourselves and to help our people. We lift up in this time of prayer and praise and remembrance those that have gone before us, that blazed a trail and did not live to see this day. All of the women, all of the men, all of the gender nonconforming, all of our trans beloved, all that have gone before us, whose memories we have, whose ashes we have, whose grave sites we remember. We thank you for every soldier, hallelujah. And we thank you for every opportunity that we have had to serve. And now, in their name and for their sake and for the sake of those who live among us, those that have chosen life and those that are struggling with life, give us grace, give us ability, and give us power, give us opportunity, and give us whatever it is we need to succeed, to put an end to HIV and AIDS in our lifetime as a scourge in our communities. We believe you for it, we trust you for it, and we say that it is so. In the name of all that is pure and right and just and divine. Amen and amen. God bless you all. This was outstanding.
Amen. Thank you all tonight. We have one announcement, Bishop Flunder, which I'm going to let you make.
All right. God bless all of you who are with us tonight. The gatekeepers, as my grandmother used to say, is getting gooder and gooder over time. And I'm asking you tonight to support our broadcast. We are expanding. Our reach is growing. We are in more places now and more opportunities to be heard. And we're expecting in the year coming for that expansion to be explosively greater than it is now. And what we need is your support. If you've been helped, if you have been helped, if you have been informed, if you have heard voices that speak the things that you feel and have heard in your secret closet and places for a long time, and you can feel an amen in your spirit, send a donation via Cash App to $TFAM annual or PayPal at www.paypal.me/TFAMJustice, TFAMJUSTICE. Make a contribution. Spirit, I'm so sure, is speaking into you. I'm encouraging you to seed into Beyond the Gatekeepers. God bless you is my prayer.
Thank you, everyone, for watching the show. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you so much, and we will see you next week. God bless. Have a great evening.
Thank you.